Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good afternoon, friends. I'm still in the clouds. I haven't come down from the clouds from announcing to you that Dean Christina Lopez will be joining us as a co-host on our team. And every day since I've made that announcement with you, Christina and I have been communicating with each other, going over content that we can bring. She's been immersing herself in the podcast. I mean, of course, she was on, but it's been a few years since she was on as a guest. And, just things that we're talking out loud about. So don't quote us on this, but we're like, yeah, you can do a series called Dean to Dean. And she can bring in a lot of the deans in her network and talk about what's going on inside the admission office. And she's got a unique perspective because she's been both an admissions dean director and VP of enrollment. So you really see that big picture down. We're talking about maybe doing a Seven Sisters series with the different Seven Sisters. And so I'm telling you this because if our recording works out well and we have hours blocked out on Tuesday to record a bunch of things, then you'll hear from Christina on Thursday's episode. The next reason I'm stoked, and this is also a tip for all you entrepreneurs out there, including college counselors, independent college counselors. When you own a business, don't get stuck doing the parts of the job that you either are not that great at or you don't enjoy very much. You're the boss. You don't have to have an employee mentality. My 4 favorite parts of college counseling are college list building, helping students get scholarships, answering questions, just like the ones that we get on this podcast from our listeners, and admission strategy. What can I do within the context of being authentic to increase my chances? Those are my 4 favorite things. And the one thing you noticed I didn't say on there was the writing piece. Now, writing's not exactly slimy okra, which if you listen, that's my worst food. But it's like an 8 out of 10, I would say, as far as how much I enjoy it, where the other parts are like 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. List building, admission strategy, question answering, scholarship counseling. And the writing's also a huge time suck. A lot of times people say to me, I don't understand how you can do everything that you do. Well, one thing that's helping me is I just got emancipated from the writing. I found someone who's better than me, enjoys it more than me. She's happy as a clam, and I'm over the moon. So I'm pretty happy right now. Some good stuff happening both in my professional life as well as in the podcast life here. But just a tip for you independent college counselors, of which we have a lot who listen, for professional development. If you're not hugely a big fan of the writing piece, can free up your time considerably to work on other things. And that could be true for another component. Maybe you don't like list building. You find somebody who does that and the writing's your jam and you go all in on that. And the other lesson here is something my dad told me when I was a little kid. Hire people who are better than you are. Jay, my new content writing expert, is better than me at essays. Christina Lopez knows more than me about enrollment management. So I'm pumped to have 2 people join me doing what I do, who are better than what I do at what they do. And it just makes the team stronger. All right, more good news. This is personal news, but I shared the bad news. I got to share the good news. So regular listeners know, I'm going to say it was a little more than a year ago. I went to the mail, and you don't like going to the mail and seeing a letter from the IRS, especially when it's pretty thick. It's a bit of a heart dropper. So I open up the letter and it says you owe between $20,000 and $21,000 in back taxes. Now, I try incredibly hard to dot my I's, cross my T's, and be incredibly ethical. So that was not good. So to make a long story short, my accountant had made some mistakes in 2 successive years. So guess what? Time for a new accountant. So I hire a new accountant, and I shared this with you before. And the accountant gets that bill down from like almost 21 to like 6,900, which nobody likes to pay $6,900 you weren't expecting to pay, but it's a lot better than 21,000. I can tell you that. So I shared that before, but you know what I didn't share? You know, the accountant is out of South Florida and works with his wife, who's also an accountant. And they said, looking over these taxes, I think that you didn't claim all the deductions that you make. Like one of the things that we kind of specialize in is going back and looking at, past years and seeing if you left anything on the table. So, now this is after they took me from 21,000 down to 6,900. And to be honest, it's somebody who I've known for a few years anyway. So I didn't just like randomly go on the internet and find anybody. So I said, sure, let's go ahead and do it. Well, to make a long story short, I got a letter yesterday saying that my appeal had been successful and the IRS now owes me $6,500, which is almost the same as that $6,900 that I had to pay. And I just had to like play my gospel music, start praising God, go on a little praise walk. And anyway, had to share that good news with you guys. All right. I also want to make a couple corrections from last episode. An astute listener sent me a text, said, I'm loving this episode, but do you know that you just said Brown doesn't have engineering? And I'm like, I don't think I said Brown doesn't have engineering, because in my mind, Brown doesn't have robust engineering, but Brown has engineering. But then I went back and listened, and gosh darn it, he was right. I sure enough did say that. So normally when I have a student that wants to go to the Ivy League for engineering, they're going to usually look at Cornell, Penn, Columbia, or Princeton, because those 4 have the most robust engineering programs. And each of those 4 have at least 250 engineering grads a year, with Columbia some years hitting 500, and then Cornell offering a whopping 800 to 1,000 engineering degrees a year. Of course, Cornell is like significantly bigger than Brown. And Princeton has very robust engineering, especially for a school its size. But all 8 Ivy League schools have engineering. And each one issues a minimum of 100 engineering degrees a year, with Dartmouth, Yale, Brown, and Harvard still offering engineering, but more in that sort of, 100 to 200 range in terms of degrees that they have. So they often get overlooked because they're smaller, but my students in engineering at those schools have been very happy and do think that those programs are underrated. So I wanted to correct that. I don't know what I said. Got to be careful. It says in the Bible, where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. The other thing that I said, it wasn't so much a mistake as an omission. I went back and listened to the episode again, and I gave out the admissions vernacular of institutional methodology, or IM, and I talked in depth about that. I'm not going to say it again. It was here. If you need to listen to it, you can go back and hear that episode. But one thing I failed to mention, and I kind of need to say that if I'm talking about IM or institutional methodology, is that schools that use institutional methodology or IM, they require the CSS profile. And they're going to use that, not the FAFSA, as their primary way of determining financial need of the student. So I should have said that. All right, friends, YCBK Plus comes out on Wednesday. And yep, that's our newsletter that covers articles about important things in higher ed that we either didn't cover at all, or we just skimmed the surface of. If we were a daily podcast, we'd have time to dive into this, but I think it's really important if you want to be an informed citizen to know some of the big macro issues that are happening in the world of higher ed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you what are the articles that are covered in Wednesday's newsletter. Okay. So there are 8 of them this month. There's an article citing severe math deficits, UC faculty demanding a return to SAT tests for STEM applicants. There's an article about how more and more people are bypassing the bachelor's degree. There's an article on how Arizona State faces Department of Justice investigation over their DEI practices. There's an article on how the law is calling on Colorado colleges and saying that they must provide abortion drugs. So this is Colorado law. And then there's an article on 6 higher education trends to keep an eye on for the academic year. There's an article called Why Ambitious Students Are Now Focusing on AP Exams. And I remember not too long ago when the tuition discount rate was at 49%. By the way, this is a way you can think of the tuition discount rate. I'll keep it simple. Let's say the cost of attendance for a school was, $70,000. And of that 70,000, let's say I'll keep it simple. 50,000 was tuition. If on average a school collected 25,000 of that 50, then it would be a 50% tuition discount rate. In other words, the amount in aggregate that they're bringing in is only half of what's listed as the sticker price. So I remember when it was seen as almost a 5-alarm fire when the tuition discount rate is now up to 49% for private nonprofits. Well, NACUBU, who we've talked about before, National Association of College University Business Officers, they really quality organization. They have a new article out saying that tuition discount rate has reached 57% for private nonprofits. Wow. And then the last article, 3 takeaways that we can learn from spring enrollment data. So if you're not getting YCBK Plus, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, look under the About YCBK tab, and you'll see a link. It's completely free. Check it out. Okay, friends, you may remember when I did a deep dive about a year ago on the financial duress and stress that colleges are under, and I read 6 different articles from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, and they were from 6 different contributors. Now, these were short, like 90-second type of, maybe 500 worders, if that. Well, now they're back with another one called How Bad is Higher Ed's Budget Crunch? 11 experts unpack a crisis we all knew was coming. And while it's painful, it is extremely important, relevant, salient. And I'm going to do what I did last year. Over the next 11 episodes, I'm going to read you these 11 entries because I think they're just that important. They really, really are. And so, so you're going to hit that on today's episode as well. Friends, I had a conversation with a friend of the podcast. And he's become a professional friend for me. He's a college counselor. We've known each other for about 6 years. And we have at least 1 or 2 deep dives on college admissions every year. And I like to call them when I'm on one of my long drives. But we were talking that day, and he had 2 suggestions that he thought could make the podcast even better. And he loves the podcast. He said it's been a tremendous source for him. So he wasn't being negative, but we can always be better, right? And I listened to him, and I liked his suggestions, and I want to implement them effective immediately. So one of his suggestions was when we do like a 3-parter or even a 2-parter, and he preferred if we didn't do the 4 or 5s, if we kept it to 3. Why do we have to go Monday, 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 Monday? Why can't we go Monday, Thursday, Monday? And he had a good point, which is then I don't have to remember a week ago as easily. Now, the history of this goes back to 2022 when we launched the second episode of the week, the Monday episode. Back then we used to routinely have 2-hour episodes. I mean, we had 5-parters because we always had a book chapter for the first 3.5 years from my book. And then we almost always had an In the News where we looked at a news article. And then we still had a question from a listener, college spotlight, and an interview. We had like 5 parts a lot of times. And they were oftentimes 2 hours. I was happy when they'd be an hour and a half. And so the thinking was long episode on Thursday, short episode on Monday. So it kind of put me in that framework of they're completely distinct. But they've kind of morphed over time. And sometimes Monday's even longer than Thursday. So I had to kind of emancipate myself from that mentality. But as I listened, I'm like, yeah, why can't we do that? So what I want to do is try it for about a year. And then I'll reach out and see what you guys like better. The Monday. In other words, when we have a Monday interview, it'll stay only in Monday. Thursday episodes stay only on Thursday versus we just run them consecutively. So I'm gonna experiment. I thought he made a lot of sense, and I'm gonna do it. The second idea he had, and I can't promise this, I'm gonna try really, really, really hard to pull this one off. He said the other thing that would be great is when you go with part one on a multi-part interview, if you can have the whole thing up on the website at the time before you even launch part one, because sometimes I'm like hanging on a cliff and I want to hear it. I don't want to wait a week. It'd be so great if I could just go right to the website and hear it immediately. So I'm going to try my hardest to do that one. That one's a little tougher because it's out of my control. I have to first record it, then I have to edit it. Then Nemanja has to do his part. He does all of our sound edits. He's really quick on the draw, so it's probably not going to bottleneck there. But there's just multiple people involved. He might be on vacation. And then after he does it, then we have to send it to John, our webmaster, and has to upload. Like, so for example, the interview that you heard from Dan Chambliss on Thursday, I actually did send that over for uploading, but I caught John right when he was going on vacation. So there's like multiple people have to be available, but we're going to try our best. I feel I can pull it off the majority of the time. And those are his two suggestions, and we're going to implement them. The third major announcement I have to make, and I have to give a shout out to Andy Bernstein. She's one of our volunteers who came forward to help me. She's got significant podcast experience. She had a lot of recommendations. One is podcasts are moving to visual a lot more now, and we really need to have that YouTube channel. And she highly recommended we use Riverside as our recording software. So I have a meeting with Riverside 9 a.m. in the morning. I'm ready to commit to their contract immediately. And I'm hoping when I record on Tuesday with Christina that we're using Riverside. I don't know how long it's going to take to work out all the kinks and learn YouTube and get all that. But I know we are determined to launch a YouTube channel and to have video podcasts up. I'm absolutely committed to that. I can't tell you for sure when the launch will occur, but hopefully sooner rather than later. All right, friends, I told you that I was going to share some of the new creative and aggressive tactics that colleges are using to recruit students. And I'm going to do that. So you're going to hear that on today's episode. But I'm calling an audible because I'm implementing ASAP the suggestion from a member of our listening family. So we'll close out with part 2 of Dan Chambliss, How to Get the Most Out of College and Why Liberal Arts Colleges Are So Powerful. We'll close out with that rather than you have to wait till Thursday to hear that. All right, let's dive in with the article from the Chronicle that you'll be hearing from me over the next 11 podcasts. So it starts out by saying this. And by the way, if I'm going to read something that's on a paywall, I feel like I need to give the Chronicle their plaudits. So it's the best $10 I spend every month in terms of educating myself about what's going on in the world of higher ed. And I would recommend that you seriously consider taking out a subscription. It's really good. So I do need to say that. I won't say it all 11 weeks, but I need to say it a few times. All right, this is a May 12th article, 2026. It says a steady drumbeat of bad budgetary news has hit higher ed. Staff cuts, program eliminations, credit rating downgrades, buyout offers. One recent study found that a large number of colleges are at risk from a cash flow perspective. Last fall, the Chronicle surveyed hundreds of administrators who work closely on college finances. Only 1 in 5 told us that their institution's budgets were sufficient to achieve their mission. 1 in 5. We asked 11 experts a few questions. How serious is the budget crunch? What can colleges do about it? What does it mean for the future of the sector and for those who work in it? Here's what they told us. And so each of these 11 contributors has a slightly different perspective. So the first one is from Nicholas Zapos. Nicholas Zapos is a chancellor emeritus at Vanderbilt. And his article is entitled, Merge While You Still Can. Merge while you still can. So here's what Nicholas says. The demographic cliff is not speculation. It's arithmetic. Across much of the Midwest and the Northeast, the number of college-age students is shrinking. For tuition-dependent liberal arts colleges, with modest and small endowments, the effects are already visible. Rising tuition discount rates, escalating marketing budgets, increasingly elaborate enrollment strategies, which I'll be talking about later today. Institutions are competing more intensely for fewer students. The pressure is not evenly distributed. Flagship publics and well-endowed institutions with national reputations remain financially resilient. But among private nonprofit colleges enrolling fewer than 2,000 students, warning signs are clear. Projections show sustained declines in high school graduates across large parts of the country through the end of the decade. At the same time, tuition discount rates at private colleges now exceeds 50% on average, steadily eroding net tuition revenue. These forces are compounding quickly. Some colleges have already closed or merged into stronger partners, often at the cost of their name and mission. Others are running persistent deficits, drawing down their unrestricted endowment, slowly losing the financial cushion that once ensured stability. Avoiding this trajectory will require something higher ed has rarely embraced: preemptive consolidation. Imagine two liberal arts colleges, Athens College and Sparta College. Each enrolls 1,500 students and holds a $250 million endowment. Each runs annual deficits driven by heavy tuition discounting, rising fixed cost. Cash reserves are thin, and fundraising cannot keep pace with the demand. Neither institution is sustainable. Now imagine a true consolidation, a merger that deliberately caps enrollment at 1,500 students, preserves the intimacy of the liberal arts model, concentrates operations on a single campus, repurposing or even selling the other campus, and requires large administrative and faculty reductions. Duplicative costs in admissions, IT, advancement, and executive leadership would be eliminated. 2 boards and 2 presidents would become one. One physical plant would carry forward the mission. The financial benefit would be substantial. A combined endowment of roughly $500 million supporting a single operating footprint would bolster annual payout relatives to expenses. Fixed costs would fall. Capital investment could shift from defensive enrollment tactics to actively pursuing academic priorities. The result would not be a large institution, it would be a leaner, more durable one. Selecting a single campus would provoke alumni resistance. The layoffs would be painful, and institutional pride would take a hit. This is not easy work. Yet the alternative is gradual financial depletion and academic mediocrity born out of financial strain. The tragedy would not be consolidation. The tragedy would be waiting too long, as Nicholas Zepos, Chancellor Emeritus at Vanderbilt University. Next week up, Michael Horn has an article called Cash is King. And Michael Horn teaches at Harvard Graduate School of Education, and he is the co-host of the Future You podcast with Jeff Zelengo. So we'll be reading his Cash is King article next week. All right, friends, let's transition to one of my favorite questions that's come in for a long time. A very precocious student from Texas sent it in. And I have a guest host joining me. I told you I was going to do a little bit of guest hosting. Well, we have a couple co-hosts on sabbatical. Chris Teare joins me to take this question.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friends, Chris Teare is with us today. And thank you, Chris. Welcome back to your College Bound Kid podcast.
Well, Mark, real pleasure to be back. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for that nice crab cake you treated me to in Baltimore. Boy, that was good.
It was great to meet you in person for the first time after our correspondence. And glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, friends, if you haven't heard Chris Teare, he was on before. Just put in Chris Teare, Teare, YCBK, and it'll pull up. We had a great conversation. And so, yeah, he's in his 5th decade. He's got multiple years in the counseling side. Is it true that you were once a head of school or a principal? Somebody told me that other than you.
Yes, I was both the upper school director
Yeah.
of a school in Brooklyn, New York, and I was the head of a
Yeah.
school in Massachusetts. I was the assistant head of a school in the Virgin Islands while also doing college counseling work. So as part of why I bring different perspectives to some of these questions
And
because I've been
that's why you're on
in,
here today, by the way. I like different
in,
perspectives. And then also
in
just before, before we were on, Chris and I were talking about how when you work college fairs, you get so many basic questions, but those aren't the kinds of questions our listeners, ask. I'll oftentimes talk with admission leaders. I used to run several big college fairs, and people would be like, why am I spending all this money? Hotel airfare, rent a car, meals, flying all the way for someone to ask me a basic question on the web. And so I only bring that up because Chris did that for 3 years as well. So he's been on both.
including at your fair in Atlanta. That great.
Oh, you've come to that fair.
I covered the Southeast for Drew, and so I was at that KIP fair with all sorts of folks from the independent schools as well, and it was always a superb fair as fairs go, and some of the questions were better than others.
Yeah, the KIP fair morphed into the whole region. You know how you would do KIP, then you do Westminster, then you do Woodward. Well, anyway. This
Yeah,
is
I
talk
was
for us to get off topic. Let's get back to our listeners here. Too much inside baseball.
indeed.
We've got some great questions, and Chris and I are going to answer 3 of them today over the next hour or so. Chris, let's start out with the one from a student. I have a policy. When a student asks a question, you go to the front of the line. And
Nice.
what a thoughtful question from a student. Normally, we don't make school recommendations just because we need more information. There's so much we don't know that Chris and I would gather if we were working with a student. But for this student, we're going to throw out some recommendations. But let me play the question, and you can kick off the conversation, and then I'll chime in and add something. By the way, listeners, you should know, anytime I record somebody, we don't get together and plan ahead of time. Chris brings his knowledge and skill set to the background. I bring mine, and I'll just play off whatever he says. So let's play the question and take it where you want to go, Chris.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for all the great info on your podcast. My family and I have been listening to you for the last couple of years, learning about the college process in preparation for my senior year. I'm finishing my junior year of high school this week, and I attend a very large public high school in Texas, where school counselors have around 600 kids each, and most kids never meet their counselor, but I've worked hard to be known to mine. However, I found out this week my counselor has retired, so I don't know when I will be able to meet whoever my new counselor is, and it's doubtful I will be able to make contact with them before college applications are due. And so I wondered if you or any of your team might be willing to weigh in on the question I would most wish to ask a counselor right now. I'm in the IB program at my school, in the top 2% of my class, and I think I have strong extracurriculars. I'm a humanities girl and love literature and history. When researching colleges, I've typically been drawn to schools with an open curriculum or wonderfully nerdy liberal arts schools. But I recently discovered that most of the schools I'm drawn to are meets needs schools, and when my parents started doing net price calculators, the per year price of those schools was way more than my family can pay. I see now I can't really consider any meets needs schools and will need to chase merit to afford college, but I'm having a very hard time figuring out what schools might be my best chance at merit scholarships. There are a couple of large southern state universities with honors colleges that publish merit awards right on their websites, but most schools don't seem to publish this information. Would you or anyone on your team be willing to give me advice on specific schools that would be likely to offer merit, or even suggest some specific schools I should look into? I'm willing to look anywhere that's affordable, but I would love to get out of Texas if possible, and I would love to find a place where I can find other students that also really love learning. I'd be really grateful for any suggestions. Thank you for all you do. It's really appreciated.
Mark, great question from the student. Really appreciate her intelligence. Would love to work with her and have recruited her when I was on the college side. The first piece about the retiring or retired counselor is there any chance the student can reach out to that counselor? In my school years, there were times when teachers who had left a school, retired, or moved to another school would write letters for students who were rising seniors, even though the teacher or counselor was no longer in the school. And they would put into the letter, this student is so special that I'm going out of my way to do this, even though I'm no longer at the school. So there might be an angle to play there. I know that when I left my school in the Virgin Islands, there was a student for whom I wrote a letter for her senior year applications, although I would no longer be at the school, and it helped her go on to Yale. And so there might be an angle to play there. If that doesn't work, the student should make the first available appointment with the new counselor, say, welcome to our school, I really need your help. She should bring along her resume or list of activities or list of colleges or likely major, the first deadline she's going to try to meet, and ask, what can I do to help you help me? What can I do to make your job easier? And then get the new counselor, whatever the new counselor requests, and be genuine with and effusive with thanks and appreciation. So might be a new relationship, so start it off right. With regard to merit money at a college that's great in literature and humanities, has an open curriculum, has students who love learning, ideally outside of Texas, when I hear this kind of thing, I sort of work with a Venn diagram in mind, where I have circles for each of these criteria, and then I'm looking for the overlaps where the different areas that the student seeks are concerned. And so we need a circle for merit money. We need another one for strength in literature and history, humanities, another for love of learning, for its intrinsic value, and if possible, find these places outside the student's home state of Texas. Regarding merit money, as a general rule, I've found that the real estate rule of location, location, location is sometimes helpful. Take a high quality liberal arts college in the Northeast, and it will likely have a higher sticker price than in the Midwest or Southeast. In addition, the Midwest and Southeast often have to put significant merit scholarships on the table to lure students from the Northeast. In terms of that Venn diagram, I know you've had Steve Antonoff on the program to talk about the College Finder. He's got great lists of colleges that are particularly generous with merit money, lists of colleges strong in literature and history, and places with few, if any, course requirements, because the student speaks about an open curriculum. The Fisk College Guide, Princeton Review's Best 385 Colleges, they have relevant information on strong programs, particular aspects of campus life that might be helpful. In terms of specific suggestions of colleges, were I this student's counselor, I would have in mind, along the lines I've just described, places like Kenyon, like Lawrence University, Lewis and Clark, Reed College, Sarah Lawrence, Ursinus. Those are places that all came up as meeting some of the student's criteria. The other thing, if this student were in my care, I would want to talk with her about the women's colleges. And in terms of her criteria, Agnes Scott, Mount Holyoke, and Smith in particular. A personal example, my eldest daughter wanted liberal arts colleges, focused on women's colleges, and in the end declined an offer from Wellesley because the offer from Agnes Scott was so much better on net price due to lower sticker price and merit money. She was also offered the chance to graduate in 3 years because of her AP scores. And it all worked out beautifully. She wears her Agnes Scott ring to this day and has just finished her second master's as she goes into a career as a child psychologist. It's also something, this student sounds like such a serious student that she sounds like someone who may go on for a PhD. And we know that liberal arts colleges are the places where many eventual PhDs get their undergraduate degrees. It could be very much an idea of get through college with no debt as the first step on toward more steps in higher ed. Where Smith and Holyoke are concerned, we've had the sad demise of Hampshire College, but Smith and Holyoke are now still part of a 4-college consortium along with Amherst College and UMass Amherst. And the student, if she were to enroll in Smith or Holyoke, would be able to take courses at Amherst or UMass. And then a couple of places that are really near and dear to my heart, where I worked at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. There's a great honors program with large merit scholarships, beautiful campus, nice town, easy train ride into New York City. Student body, especially in the honors program, takes learning very seriously. And then another one, and this would violate the open curriculum notions the student has, is St. John's College in Annapolis and Santa Fe. I have a master's degree from St. John's, so I'm not entirely objective here as well. But it's a place where students genuinely love learning in a broad, deep experience of the liberal arts. And there aren't choices in the curriculum the way the student might like, but boy, would she find people who love learning.
Chris, that was fantastic. And I really liked how you pointed out that just because a counselor's gone, it doesn't mean that they can't do a rec. We haven't talked about that enough on the podcast. And friends, you should know that also applies to teachers. So this is a very common thing that happens where, oh my goodness, I was going to ask this teacher, in the counseling room, and now they're not here anymore. And I thought they was their number one. Yeah, you can still do a rec. A lot of times that will be an other rec that you can submit. But from a school standpoint, it's, technically it's got all the things that they need. Colleges are always going to value anybody who knows you well. I love the point Chris made about maybe the person will even say, I rarely do that, but this student's so special. That kind of thing really is going to resonate in any admission office. That was a fantastic tip. A couple other things. And by the way, I want to concur with what Chris said. You are very impressive. And there are a lot of colleges that are going to be interested in you. You're in the top 2% of your class. Schools will throw money at you if you apply to the right list. And also, your humanities girls, you said, love literature and history. People are looking for that. Not as many students, come in with that level of passion. So let me share some schools that I would be recommending based on what you've shared. Grinnell College, huge endowment, smart kids like you. Warren Buffett's money, Geico money, built that thing. One of the largest endowments per students. And they give generous merit and generous need. And it's full of very, very smart rigor, kids with lots of rigor. Like the kids that I have that have gone to Grinnell are students like you. Tremendous professors, bright kids, strong curriculum. You'd find you don't find many schools like a Grinnell that give merit money. And I completely agree with what Chris said about location. Like you throw Grinnell in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Boston, there's no way in the world they're giving merit money because they wouldn't need to.
Great idea. I was amazed when I visited Grinnell some years back. Just absolutely superb.
Yeah. Now, Rochester is not a small liberal arts school, but they're one of the few national universities, along with Brown, that have the open curriculum. They do have merit money. And so it'd be worth looking at. Also, really smart kids. Some others, Sarah Lawrence, smart kids, very creative school. A lot of fantastic school for writers. I was just met with a client last night who I'm very excited about because the student is passionate about writing, and they're heading off to Sarah Lawrence's writing camp. I've got a student going there from the Bay Area this year. Could not be happier. Really generous merit money, small liberal arts, huge focus on literature and history. That's just 35 miles from New York City. Can access New York City easily. Smith, Chris already talked about women's colleges, and Smith does have merit money. They don't give away as much as some schools because they're a hot in demand school, but they do have it, and they have a complete open curriculum. So they check all the boxes. Like I said, I don't know if you're open to women's colleges. I do encourage students to visit one, and see what you think. A lot of times, if you always say visit with an open mind. And like Chris said, they're part of a 4-school consortium. So you can also take classes at Amherst, which is another place that's got open curriculum. No merit money, but you can tap in Amherst, Holyoke, and UMass Amherst. So you can tap into a lot of schools. Buses run. You can tap into the clubs. There's a lot of opportunities there. Denison is one that technically doesn't, they wouldn't be considered an open curriculum school, but they're one of the leaders in letting you design your own major. So the other thing I want you to look at is there's a lot of small liberal arts schools that let you design your own major, which in effect allows you to create an open curriculum. And so that opens up a whole bunch of schools when you look at what schools let you design their own major, still small liberal arts, love history, love humanities, smart kids, generous merit money. Denison is one there. Another is Lawrence and Appleton, Wisconsin. They're fantastic at letting you design your own major. One of my favorites is Redlands. I have 4 kids at Redlands. Place. Yeah, because they have their Johnson, their Johnson Scholar program. It's been going since 1969. That you live in a dorm with other Johnson students and you create your own curriculum. In 2019, they celebrated their 50th year of their Johnson Scholars, and thousands of people came back. It was so formidable, and the campus is just breathtaking.
Amazing. Yep.
So
I had a niece turn down a couple of great UC offers to get full boat from Redlands, and then graduated Phi Beta Kappa and went on to Stanford for a PhD. So that's a great suggestion.
Yeah. No, I love this school. Chris, I'm so happy you shared the story about the Redlands grad who went on to get a PhD from Stanford, because I've not always been successful at explaining to people the opportunities at Redlands, because some people just rule it out right away because of the higher acceptance rate. But I have 4 students there now who are thriving, and they sure are glad they didn't take it off their list because of the higher acceptance rates. In fact, one of the kids I have there, both of his parents are very distinguished professors in the University of California system. And the mom actually does curriculum evaluations for other schools. And originally, she wasn't sure about Redlands, just because higher acceptance rate, it wasn't kind of one of the household names in her circles. But then she said, I'm going to do what I do for other schools. I'm going to study the department and I'm going to study the curriculum. And boy, did she ever come away impressed. And now she loves the school. She gave her son permission to accept it over some much more selective schools with more prestige and lower acceptance rates. Another one I love, and I just spent time with their VP of enrollment, is the College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio. They are a leader in mentored undergraduate research. And so, so you start working even junior year, you can do a full-blown mentored undergraduate research where you come with ideas and the faculty will build it around you. They have incredible placement record, in med school and law school and other things. And lots of students go on to get PhDs. Very generous merit money school. It was founded by the people that founded Princeton. Occidental, they don't give as much as Worcester, but also founded by the people that founded Princeton. They also are a leader in mentored undergraduate research because, Princeton does this, right? So these people they try to take a little slice of what they had at Princeton and try to replicate it. And so Worcester does that. So does Oxy. Oxy, like I said, you won't see the 40,000 merit offers as much at Oxy. They do have a few of them, but Worcester does a lot of 30 to 40,000 type merit packages.
That's the difference between Ohio and Los Angeles.
Exactly. I mean, Chris's point is true. It's location that really is what determines the merit, because, how many people do we work with that won't even look at Ohio? They'll say, I'm not, that's the reason why people call it flyover country, when Chris and I know some of the best small liberal arts colleges are in Ohio, like a lot of them. It's kind of a hidden jewel.
That's why Kenyon was the first one on my list in terms of the power in literature and the quality of, just programming, beautiful campus, but pretty quiet place, not a party school. And
and the other thing is, I'm seeing really strong packages out of Kenyon, like I never used to before. By the way, Kenyon's coming on our podcast. I'm excited to Sarbeth Fleming, who I've known forever. Sarbeth Fleming was in Davidson's admission office when Karis, who's now 30, when she went through the process, and she went from there to, Westminster and Atlanta, and she was at Emory for a really good long time, and she now leads that office. So I'm
Yeah,
looking forward
she's
to
great.
having. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having Sarbeth on. She's one of those call it like it is. Folks just like Christina Lopez is. You're gonna love having her. So that's a really good one because it's got the strong humanities with the good merit and the beautiful campus. Might not technically be an open curriculum, but I think you'll find there's a lot of flexibility. Schools all have lots of options. You have
Yes.
your courses. Yeah, you have your core classes, and then you have, your distribution requirements. And there's lots of choices to pick from. These schools are really flexible. I think you'd find ample choices that you like. And then a couple others that I would share would be Whittier and Goucher, just in
Yeah.
Baltimore. Goucher, once again, technically it's not an open curriculum school, but it was one that has tremendous flexibility in the curriculum, and it's a very good merit money school and another really beautiful campus. And you're right there in Baltimore. So Chris probably knows a lot about Goucher. His daughter went to school in Baltimore, and he's in Baltimore a good amount. Yeah.
I've been to Goucher many times. It's a beautiful campus. And for some families, when I was at Johns Hopkins recently, there's some families who get a little bit concerned because they've watched The Wire with regard to what Baltimore's like. And Goucher is not in West Baltimore. It's, a beautiful, just on the edge of Baltimore to the north, getting to Towson. It's a lovely campus.
Yeah, you're more likely to find an equestrian rider there that comes from horse country than
That's
somebody
true.
from, because they're a big horse school. When I was
That's
at
true.
Westtown, a lot of the riders, as they call themselves, would look at Goucher.
Yes. Yes.
The only thing that I would just disagree with you about, Chris, is that Reed doesn't give merit money. So that's
I thought it was on a list in Steve's book, and that's where that one came from.
Very intellectual. Right.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of really cool things there. No grading. I was there on a school fly-in not too long ago, but they're one of the few schools. There's not a long list of schools outside of the Mid-Atlantic in New England that don't give merit, especially in liberal. Stanford, Caltech, Northwestern, but most of the schools outside, Chris is right. The merit money thing is usually very regional. Now, there are some exceptions to the regional comments and aid we have discussed here. For example, Whittier is in Whittier, California, about 20 miles from LAX airport, and they do give generous merit money. If I'm being completely honest with you, a school that gives large merit offers to a number of students has a lot in order to fill their class. So they can be in a hot location, like Simmons in Boston, but the demand for Simmons is not the same as the demand for BU, BC, Tufts, Northeastern, Harvard, Wellesley, MIT, or Babson. So they give more merit aid. So while there's a correlation between hot location and merit aid, the bigger correlation is how much is the institution in demand, and do they need to incentivize students in order to get them to enroll and to win battles against their overlap schools. The Ivies don't give merit. So then you have what some people call the little Ivies, or the NESCAC schools, and then you have the Georgetowns and the Swarthmores and the Haverfords, and they don't give merit. And she's absolutely right. Like, look at the schools. When you think open curriculum, people think of places like Vassar and Hamilton and Wesleyan and Amherst. And these are not schools that give merit. Like, she's really right. When you think of most of the traditional open curriculums, they are meets need schools, meaning they meet full demonstrated need, and they give almost all of the resources away on a need-based analysis. And you're smart to have done the research ahead of time to know that if your family's not going to get need-based aid, then you better be ready to pay, $90K plus. And you're smart to learn that ahead of time. And, you can find amazing schools that give you everything you're looking for. And with your kind of profile, Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about how important it is that this student have a high level of engagement, because some schools might pass on her and think that, look at you, you're top 2%. We like you, but you're probably not coming. We can't give unlimited money out unless she has some engagement. And you've got some good experience with that. Anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, it's a wonderful point, Mark. And that demonstrated interest, get request information, have special email address so it doesn't get lost. open those emails, click on the links, the virtual tours, attend the webinars, get the touches. It makes me think of, one of your co-hosts, Andy Strickler at Conn College, speaking of a NESCAC that does give some merit money. He showed me their affinity software last summer. And, there are places that are going to read a high flyer like this in exactly this way. You got to show us some love. And if all that initial stuff gets you interested, figure out who reads your high school, reach out to that person, ask intelligent questions, see if that reader has visited your high school, will visit your high school, try to create the opportunity for a little bit of conversation. Because as I've said in other contexts, when I worked for Drew, I got a report in my inbox every morning with the students from my territories who had been on our website, which pages they had been on, and how long they had been on those pages. And when I saw that kind of thing, I knew that I had a student who had some real interest. And because Drew's acceptance rate was far higher than its yield, as is the case with a number of the schools we've discussed, if I saw somebody showing that kind of interest, that was someone I was going to make every effort to get to know better and seek to admit and enroll.
Chris, explain why the report would show where they went on the website and how long they were there.
I think where they went has to do with alignment with the students' interests and possible major. And that's what I say to my students all the time is click on the links of interest to you. If you're planning to apply in finance or business, well, be all over those. I have a rising senior who wants to study architecture, be all over that. If you're undecided, look at different pages and see what's going on there. If it's a school that's going to have supplementary essays, you're going to need to develop understanding to convince the college that you really know who they are and what's special that they have that's right for you. And that's going to take that investigation of what's going on the website. And in terms of how long the student's there, I think it's because they're actually reading. I think it's because they may be making a sandwich for all I know.
Sure.
But it looks like, maybe we've really engaged them. So
schools, you'd be surprised at how the role analytics plays and how every year it gets more sophisticated. I can say this publicly because it was said public. It was said at the SACAC conference, Chris, that you often go to. I went to a session by Rhodes, which is another fantastic school, great merit money. And they literally said there's a stealth applicant, and that's a term that we use for someone that has had no engagement at all. And we know there's a less than 1% chance that student's going to come. So why should we throw out a big offer? There's only so much money you can put out on the street, because if by chance your projections are off, you're working on past models of who's likely to come and how much money. But if you're off, you could go over the budget and you'll lose your job most likely.
Yeah,
so you can't.
I've asked many students, "What's a stealth bomber?" And they look at me. I say, "You don't see it coming, and it drops a bomb." What's a stealth applicant? You don't see it coming, and it drops an app. And people in the office are looking around saying, "Who's this kid?
Yes.
Where'd this kid come from?" And that I often compare this to the promposal. I say, look, before you put the ask out there to go to the prom, you want some indication you might get a yes. So you want a little, you want some interest there to say, all right, this is an offer that might be accepted.
And Chris is so right. Like, part of looking at where you go is to see that there's alignment, or sometimes a school might have some new initiative they're really excited about, and you're there and they're like, oh my goodness, you're excited about some new initiative we have. Or maybe it's what we call an undersubscribed major, and we're going to have to lay off some faculty if we don't get more kids interested, and you're hanging out in that section. So some of it is that piece of alignment. But some of it also is, let's face it, if somebody's kind of hanging out in what does the orientation look like? How a roommate select it. They're hanging out in sections like that. Is probably a pretty good indication that they've got some serious interest.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
you
That
know,
farther down the line, yeah. I was on the front end with the academic programs, but it
hmm
absolutely you see
yeah.
them in those spaces. You're getting close to reeling that one in.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned Andy and Con College, because I really would have been remiss to not mention Con College, because it's not a school that's technically considered an open curriculum, but it fits all the other criteria you're looking for, you
Yep,
know,
great
and
place.
very generous merit money. I see great
Yes.
packages out of Con College. That's be my one piece of advice to you is don't automatically rule a school up because it's not labeled as an open curriculum, school. There's a short list of those schools. You can really count them on two hands. But there's so many schools that have so much curriculum flexibility. Maybe when you look at the requirement, like a lot of schools will have like one third, one third, one third, right? One third courses in your major, you know, one third electives, and then one third distribution requirements. Like you need to take a math or a science but then when you look at the choices, there's so many choices
Right.
that fulfill that sometimes people get hung up in, well, it's not open curriculum. But if they actually looked at the range of courses they could pick from for those distribution requirements, they'd be like, oh, this is great. So
Yeah.
that'd be one piece of advice I would say is focus on schools with good merit money that have the strength of program and have the culture, maybe other things, maybe like location and things that are important to you. Don't rule a school out just because it doesn't have the open curriculum, because I think you'll find that you'll have plenty of choices, within a school. Now, I recently had Dan Chambliss back on, author of How College Works and 40-year sociology professor at Hamilton, and he did a little 5-minute blurb for us on open curriculum. That actually hasn't even aired yet. It's going to air this Thursday, our next episode 647. But listen, because one thing he talked about is the level of energy that the open curriculum produced. He thought it was transformational because you got a bunch of kids that want to be there. So
Yeah.
that is a very
Well,
positive part of the open curriculum that I think goes under, sometimes
oh,
people think of it from a standpoint of, I hate math and now I can go to school where I don't have to take math. So they think about it like that. But
well, what I was going to
yeah,
say with regard to your excellent comments on the range of options in
yeah.
a place that has distribution
hmm
requirements, there's usually something that the kids call physics for poets, right?
hmm hmm
There's usually a way through the quantitative
hmm
distribution requirement that's actually a lot more interesting and not like high school math or
hmm
science. And so that's great advice.
Yeah. The only other thing that I would say is this, you to me are not a student who I would recommend applies early decision. Because
True.
it's going
Yeah.
to lock you. You're not going to get your best aid offer. You're not going to be able to compare aid offers. There's plenty of colleges that will give you great aid offers if you have high levels of engagement and you execute quality applications. And, and sometimes, depending on the circles you're in, you feel like if I don't apply ED, I'm screwed, and some colleges will court people that way too. I mean, they can really almost make it sound like, yeah, no chance. Now, Chris and I both know there are also some schools, being honest, that you may not get in if you give up the ED option that you might have got in. So you might be walking away from some schools, but you'll have plenty of great choices amongst these schools, just the ones Chris and I have thrown out here today. If you made that your list and you had high levels of engagement, and of course you have to deliver a quality application, that goes without being said. I almost didn't mention that because if you're in the top 2% of your class, it's assumed. But I've learned the students that listen to our podcast are highly invested in their education. But anyone else listening, I don't want them to think just picking the right schools and having a high level of engagement and the Red Sea parts. You must execute strong applications with your writing, your presentation of your activities, your recommendation writers. The other thing I want to emphasize is if you had expressed interest in a different type of school, Georgia Tech, UCLA, Maryland, Wisconsin, I would not be emphasizing this engagement piece as much because it tends to pull a lot more weight with private schools, especially small private liberal arts schools that range from very selective to moderately selective. The ultra selective schools still care about who they will yield, but they give very little to no merit money, so they're not the best ones for you. And they mostly put their focus on, did you apply ED? And did you do very, very compelling custom prompts to those specific questions that they ask? That's really how they tend to evaluate it, tend to focus a lot more on demonstrated understanding. You would come away with some really good packages. But I really, really want to thank you for sending this question in. We love it when students send questions in. Student questions go to the top of the line. I'm always heartened when we get student listeners, Chris, because when I look at our data, we're mostly parents and college counselors. That's our audience.
Right.
But
Right.
it always heartens me that we're able to compete with TikTok. That's a tough sell. The modern attention span isn't made for, our last episode went 2 hours and 2 minutes. So, congratulations.
We don't need to invoke Jonathan Haidt right now and getting those phones out of the schools.
Yes.
But that is true.
Well, thank you so much for sending in this question and continue to listen, and we wish you well. And I ask a favor, can you leave a SpeakPipe message at the end when your college journey's over and tell us, I'd love it if you shared where you applied, where you got in, and where you went. Our listeners would love to hear that. I know that I would. Yeah, if you don't have to, but I'd love it if you send a message, and I'd love to, you're special, and I want to see who the special school is that ends up getting you.
Amen.
Friends, you now have 7 books you can pick from if we play your SpeakPipe question or comment or tip on the air. We have our 4 Princeton review books, The Best 390 Colleges, College Admissions 101, Essays That Kick Apps, and Princeton Digital SAT Prep. Our 3 new editions are The Calm College Method by Lisa Ruff and Linda Depker, paperback or Kindle, Peter Pitt's Small College Magic Kindle version, and College Unmazed has a book, Your Guide to Design and Document Your Home School by Holly Ramsey and Michelle Everett, paperback edition. Our authors have generously agreed to cover the shipping and handling. Just send your name and full address, the book that you want, and the episode number where we aired your SpeakPipe question or tip. Please send that to your collegeboundkid@gmail.com, and we'll forward your request to the authors. Friends, if you have ever sent an email about your book that you're entitled to get, if you send in a question and you didn't receive it, please send a second one. Just send it to, your collegeboundkid@gmail.com and let me know that you haven't received your book. We've given away close to 100 so far, and mistakes and omissions can occur. And I just had an epiphany. I am so impressed with this Texas student and your question that if you will send me an email on my personal email, mark@schoolmatch4u.com, that's schoolmatch number 4 letter u.com, I'm going to send you the same YCBK branded gifts that we recently ordered for our interviewees and our donors. That's just how impressed I am by you for sending this question. Send me an email, send me your address, and we'll get that out to you. And we'd love to hear from more students if you're out there listening. All right, friends, it's time to transition to hear about some of the creative and aggressive tactics that colleges are using in their recruitment. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'm going to cover some of them. And depending how long I go on this might be a part 1 and a part 2. It won't be a part 2 and part 3, but we'll see how long I go. So, friends, one of the leading experts in assessing the financial health of colleges is predicting 400 colleges are going to close in the next year. I'd be shocked if it's that high, but colleges are really hurting, which is why I'm doing the 11-part series and reading you these articles. Today, I'm going to share with you some of the creative and aggressive tactics colleges are using to try to meet their class. Now, I'm pretty sure the reaction that many are going to have is to be aghast when you hear some of the tactics or strategies colleges are using. But I want you to remember a few things. Colleges are nonprofits, but a nonprofit still has to be run like a business, because if you can't pay your bills, then you don't exist and you can't carry out your mission. Or if you carry it out so ineptly, you're crippled in carrying out your mission, how effective are you really at doing it? And that requires revenue. Now, it's really easy to feel like this school shouldn't do this or that school shouldn't do that. I'm going to share a couple times when people have been very honest about this. You don't hear it that often, and I understand you get blowback. Christoph Gutentag at Duke for about 35 years, we've had on the podcast. He used to be the boldest and most blunt person I've ever seen on this when he would speak to parent groups or at college board or someplace. And on one occasion, a parent reached out and said to him, during a Q&A session, that I just don't understand why you take so many students through early decision. You're not leaving hardly any spots open for the rest of us who can't afford to apply without seeing a financial aid award. So it's making it incredibly difficult for those of us who don't have the finances to just apply without seeing the price tag. And I'm paraphrasing. This is not verbatim, but Chris has done this a couple times. In fact, I brought it up with him in my interview with him because people still talk about him. He's, how boldly he answers this. In essence, he said, with all due respect, I know I may not be fulfilling your dream of having your kid with a Duke onesie in the crib, but quite honestly, you are not my boss. I answer to the president and I answer to the board. And I know that might be offensive, but I really think that straight talk is helpful to understand the perspective and predicament colleges are in. The only other time I've seen that same level of candor came from the folks at Boston College. When delivering an address to a group of counselors, the statement was made, my job is to deliver $200 million of net tuition revenue every year. And I make decisions to deliver what I'm charged to do. So there's a tension between what's healthy for the school and what feels like it's fair and equitable or mission-centric. And admissions and fundraising are really the only two ways dollars come into the school, with most of it being from admissions. Every other office in the school is dispensing money and spending it. These are the only two, account receivable branches in a school to help you make your budget. A lot of the tactics I'm going to share, they might seem cold or heartless, but if you think about it from the perspective of a VP of enrollment that has the budget and all the weight of the budget on their shoulders, you know what they're thinking a lot of times? If I don't bring in X amount of dollars, in the case of BC, $200 million of net tuition revenue, every school is going to be different based on their size and commitments. But these are some of the things that the VPs of enrollments and those in charge are thinking. If I don't bring in this budget, the janitorial staff loses their job. The cafeteria workers lose their job. The groundskeepers lose their job. So what might seem heartless is oftentimes humane if you look at it from that lens. Now, we've talked a lot about different things in past episodes. We've talked about schools like UChicago and Wake using summer programs and ED0. We've talked about publics using more use of ED in publics. We've talked about Case Western Reserve, flipping you from ED1 to ED2 and with a merit offer, Tulane, Chicago, other schools doing that. But there's some other things that are happening that we haven't discussed, and that's some of what I want to talk with you about today. Some colleges are using lottery drawings. That's right, just like a lottery. And in some cases, first prize in the lottery is full tuition. At Ohio Wesleyan, it's free room. And by the way, this isn't brand new. Ohio Wesleyan's actually been doing this now for multiple years. St. Lawrence has prizes for coming to Admitted Students Day lottery style. Muhlenberg has a guaranteed tuition for 4 years with no increase. Some schools are doing season golf passes or season ski passes, or parents have guaranteed rooms covered if they come to Parents Weekend or for coming to an admitted visit program. Some schools are doing book scholarships for 4 years. And I'm going to share a couple with you that are literally right on their websites. This is no inside secret thing I have. These are on their websites. St. Lawrence in New York, close to the Canadian border, they literally have something called Discovery Days, the Lucky Laurentian. And I'm literally going to read it to you. By attending one of our on-campus Discover U at SLU, that's not St. Louis University, that's St. Lawrence University, SLU, admitted student programs, April 11th, April 17th this year, you could win big prizes. Prizes will include grand prize, housing package, free standard double room for your first 2 years on campus, and a single room fee waived for your junior and senior years. Second grand prize, fixed cost of attendance. Yes, your cost of attendance, the amount you pay, tuition, room, and board and fees will remain the same for all 4 years, no increases. Second place prize, and we're going to give 10 of those on our Discovery Day. You get your choice of the following: a season ski pass at Titus Mountain, a season golf pass at the Oliver D. Appleton Golf Course at St. Louis University, a faculty staff parking permit for the first year, and you have your car on campus, a guaranteed room at the Best Western University, a 2-night stay, or spot in the on-campus RV Village for your family for the Laurentian weekend, which is their version of family weekend. $500 per year in additional grants added to your financial aid package. Required books and course material covered for all 4 years. Third place, up to 10 prizes will be rewarded on Discovery Day. Merchants chosen by the Office of Admissions, your choice of the following: a gift card to a local restaurant or business, and a gas card. They go on to say the Lucky Laurentian will take place during our on-campus Discovery Day. In other words, colleges are trying to get you to those admitted student visit days because they know there's a better chance of yielding you. And then they go on to say details will be shared during the event. All prizes are contingent upon full-time enrollment for the fall 2026 semester. Should you win, you will need to submit your enrollment deposit by May 1st. Now, Ohio Wesleyan also has a raffle ticket system on their admitted student day with lots of prizes, including a free room draw covered for a year. American University in D.C., they had a special incentive for the first time this year for early decision students. Only they get to take 6 free credit hours of asynchronistic education over the summer. So students get to come in with 6 free credits. It's a big savings, a couple $1,000 easily. We've talked before about High Point giving out free masters for some of their programs. Anyway, friends, hopefully you enjoyed this session. Next week, I'm going to be back with part 2. All right, friends, let's transition to part 2 of 3 of my interview with Dan Chambliss. And we're looking at a couple of things, really. How to get the most out of college and why a liberal arts education is so powerful.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 2, we have a conversation about the pros and cons of using the website Rate My Professors to find great teachers. And Dan's got some interesting thoughts. Dan tells us what a liberal arts education is. Dan and I discuss if there are certain fields of study within the liberal arts that are better at producing critical thinkers. Listen and enjoy.
Teachers are more important than topics because the big issue is your own motivation. You know, the big problem, big challenge is getting yourself to do the work and being excited about the subject. And the key to that is a great teacher for most people, most of the time.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of times when I'm giving students advice on the ACT or SAT, because every college takes either test.
Yeah.
I'll say, take a practice test. Let's see which one you're naturally better at. But about 3/4 of people score the same. So that usually doesn't eliminate the test, although I'd say about 1 in 4 times there's a clear difference. But then I say, okay, let's say you're like that 75% that scores the same when you look at the tables. Which test did you enjoy the most? Because you're going to be immersed in the material. Now, students normally have a strong preference. I'd say 90% of the time, there's one they liked more than the other.
Well, there you go.
And then I'm like, there you go, because you're going to need to be motivated.
Yes.
Yes.
It matters.
Yeah.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on the website ratemyprofessors.com?
It has the problem of any volunteer sample study. which
Mm-hmm.
is the only people who respond are people who are highly motivated, which means they either love you or they hate you. You're not really getting the typical student's response. That's the big problem. That said, in line with what you were just asking about,
Sure.
how do you find good professors? If there are more than 3 or 4 respondents,
Mm-hmm.
and if there are a lot of respondents, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people have answered about a particular professor,
Yeah.
and they're consistently in a great direction, I'd say
Mm-hmm.
that's a strong recommendation.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you that because I've talked to some college professors over the years that don't like
Oh,
the
they hate
website.
it. Oh,
Yeah,
they
they
hate
hate
it.
it.
No, sure.
I remember
I
one
can see
saying to
that.
me, because I used to, when I worked at KIPP for 14 years, the person next to me was an adjunct professor at Georgia State, in African American
Uh-huh.
studies. And
Uh-huh.
she used to say, some snotty nosed kid I gave a C rips me on the website, And so,
Yeah,
like, I hear that argument, right? But at the
right.
same time, I've said this before on a podcast, like, there was not one time that either of my kids found that they disagreed with what that website said. Like, they would use it to pick their professors when they were trying to pick which teacher, to pick. Because the
Yeah,
students would say, is that, you have to go in and say, is the person engaging?
yeah.
There is, like, how much work is involved, and is it, what's the quality of their lectures like? But
Yeah.
I think that for the most part, students are honest, just like when you talk to
Yeah.
them randomly on a campus.
Yeah.
I
Right.
agree. I see how it doesn't
Yeah.
line up with all this scientific rules of doing a survey,
No,
but but
no.
but I agree with you. The number of the reviews is very important. 3 is different than 23.
Yeah. Right. I mean, there are a lot of things to be said about it, but no, I'm with you. Sure. I think professors generally don't like student evaluations, right? I mean,
Sure, of
that's
course.
and part of it, it's not just that they're being unreasonable about it. It's that it's what, if you're the teacher and I mean, one bad evaluation can ruin your day.
Yeah. Friends, did you hear what Dan said? One bad evaluation can ruin your day. That's one reason why I say, if you want to help out our listeners, our interviewees, sure, tell others about the podcast, but write the interviewees and just tell them how meaningful something was that they said. You can do it in 2 to 3 minutes of your time, and you'll make their day. Friends, Carolyn Wood, one of our volunteers who reached out to Dan to schedule his interview, reached out section. I knew he was going to say yes, because he'd already told me that multiple people had contacted him from his last interview. And God bless your souls, by the way. And he told me how encouraged he was by the emails he heard from our listeners.
Out of, you got 40 kids in a class and one of them hates you, and you wind up like staying up all night worrying about it.
Sure.
And then you realize, like, wait a minute, maybe that's the kid who I threw out because they were picking, at somebody else or something like that. And you don't know, but it's tough.
But I bring it up because
rate my professors publicly humiliating. That's a big chunk of it too. If you get a scathing couple of bad reviews on there, the whole world knows. Geez, or you
but
think
it reminds me. Now, it's a little different, but we have close to 400 podcast reviews.
Yeah.
And sometimes someone will rip us on there and give us a 1-star and rip us, and I'll think that that's distasteful or not fair, in my opinion. But people have a right to. But then in the aggregate, I think people actually learn a lot if they actually read them, right? Because but
I think that's right.
But I'm sure professors, I'm sure good professors would also say, yeah, give me 370 reviews, and you know what I mean, and I'll I'll feel a lot better about that than if I have 4, and I'm and like all of this impression is being formed by 4 people, and maybe 1 or 2 of them was pissed off or something.
Yeah. But your students can figure that out. I mean,
the reason I bring it up is I like your idea of asking students, but I also see how that can be challenging a little bit, because one, like, what if I want to take a subject there's not that many people taking it? Like, I've got to find someone who took that subject, who took the professors, and then
that's ideal. I mean, you don't always have that option.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then some people are much more, inclined to introversion than extroversion.
Yeah. But I would
You know?
also say it's not that every professor you take has to be good.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you have to find some really good professors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like I say, in the book, we say one or two great professors can make your college career.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And the others can all be kind of stiffs or boring or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You live and learn. But you need somebody, an individual, who really gets you going. And then after that, to some extent, you can be on your own. Once you find out, gee, I love Elizabethan poetry or something, then you can read it on your own. But you need somebody to give you that start, especially. And the other thing is mentorship is really important
Mm-hmm.
in college and after college. And a lot of people don't get it. But if you do, it really improves your life.
Do you feel a student going to the department website and reading the backgrounds and bios of is that helpful or not really? Because it doesn't tell you whether someone's a good teacher.
No, it doesn't tell you whether they're a good teacher. You know what I think is the best thing, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and you're an expert on this,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say to high school parents and kids
Mm-hmm.
that the qualitative report books,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not numbers, not U.S.
Sure.
News, not any of
Sure.
that. Numbers are so easy to fudge
Sure.
and so easy. But if you've got several different, let's say, guidebooks with qualitative descriptions that all say something real positive in a certain direction about a certain school, that's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah, of
And
the
the same
school. I
about
was
professors.
focusing more on like, okay, I'm at the school
Individual
now. How do I find
professors.
the right
No,
professors?
that's
And
right.
then the guidebooks won't be good for that. Right.
There's
Yeah.
word of mouth. There's word of
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's all you can
And
do.
maybe if you have some advising, talking
Yeah,
to
but
somebody.
advisors aren't going to say something bad about somebody. But
Sure.
if you keep your ears open, you realize, like,
Mm-hmm.
Chambliss, have you considered the other possible, just like, okay,
One thing
thank
that
you.
could be good too is clubs. So let's say you want to be a philosophy
Yeah,
major and you get involved in a
yeah,
philosophy club,
yeah,
and then you
sure.
have access to a bunch of people and hey, tell
They'll
me what,
tell you.
yeah,
They'll tell you.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
other students will be honest with you in a way that professors won't.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
professional decorum, you can't say something bad.
Dan, let's talk about let's just get to the core. What is
Yeah,
a liberal arts
yeah,
education anyway?
yeah. I would say, really, I mean, there have been all kind of books written about what this is and stuff, but I would say the heart of it for me is number one is it's subjects that aren't immediately vocational, so they tend to be on broader topics that are more abstract than how to do this particular job. And the other thing is you've got to cover a variety of subjects. So you're not just taking one subject throughout your whole education. And the combination of those is real important because it gives you a broad view of things and it's an expansive view. That is, you've been exposed to a variety of different topics, which means you're less likely to be intimidated by them. Maybe you're more likely to be willing to try new things and to learn new stuff. You're not as easily buffaloed. Anyway, that's getting into the details. But basically, I would say it's not vocational and broad exposure are the two elements that strike me.
Right. And this broad exposure, you're speaking to the interdisciplinary nature of the liberal arts, right? Like you take econ, but then you also take sociology.
Right.
Yeah.
Good comparison, because in fact, there are very different approaches to sometimes the same topic, like inequality.
Mm-hmm.
And there are fights. I mean, people get mad about, like people in sociology get mad about how economics people talk about stuff. And so, yeah, and getting that comparison is important because then you realize there are some downsides to all sorts of ways of thinking about things. And that's where the critical thinking again becomes a habit. You start realizing that any immediate snap answer to something, you might want to think about that. Right? Because I took a religion course and they were talking about this other issue you hadn't even considered.
Do you have any thoughts on specific branches of study within the liberal arts in terms of producing better critical thinking? Like, do you think they're all kind of the same? Or because
Oh,
I certainly see, like, my youngest daughter, she started with psych and moved to Soc, and Soc was I think Soc is
very common.
incredible. Yes.
Very common move, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, because some psych is so science heavy,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that just kind of wasn't her jam, but she was more into like the study
Yeah,
of group behavior. That stuff fascinated her,
absolutely. Absolutely.
ethnography and all this. But and I, my undergrad was psych, but it was more social psych. Once I found
Yeah,
social psych, I loved it.
yeah,
And I love sociology too. And I certainly see how that trains the brain. You learn
yeah.
about George Herbert Cooley's looking glass self and all these different
Uh-huh.
concepts. And they
Right.
really can understand, you really can apply these, these concepts in ways to just understand the world. And
Yeah.
in a lot of different ways, right? I see that. But then sometimes I'll talk with someone who's got a philosophy background,
Yeah.
and they seem to be really, really strong thinkers.
That's right.
And it seems like that does an exceptional job at training
It
you how to
does.
think,
It does.
you
It
know?
does. And there was a study done recently that showed
Hmm.
philosophy majors did the best of any undergraduate major in the country at getting into law school.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, that's because that's the same thing. I mean, basically, what philosophy classes, what you do in there, you don't sit around and moon about, what's the meaning of life so much as
Hmm.
you dive into really difficult books and articles and
Hmm.
try to figure out what the argument is that this person's making and does it hold up, and what are the weaknesses of this argument and how do you analyze it and critique it and stuff. That's what lawyers do all day
Hmm.
is read difficult books, law books and briefs and stuff like that. Try to figure out what's going on and where the weaknesses are in the argument and the strengths and how you pitch it and all that. That's what philosophy is. And
And then, of
it's
course, history is really rich, right? Because history is so predictive of the present. Like, you really get in there, and my goodness, like that's like it completely unlocks the mystery of explaining how things are the way they are today because of history. So there's
what
value there.
Yeah, well, it's the raw material for thinking
Hmm.
about that stuff. A historian would say to you, doesn't actually predict the present,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
how do you know what does and doesn't? What are the
Yeah,
comparisons between
predict
then
hard,
and
but at
now?
least explain how things became the way they
Yeah, you
became. It's
see
really
where
good
they
at that.
came from. That's right. No, that's exactly right. And that's important because it's usually not what you think.
And then over the course of 9 years of doing this podcast, I've had the opportunity to interview quite a few people that are economists, but who focus
Yeah,
on education.
yeah, sure,
And they
sure,
seem to
sure.
have a brilliant way of,
Yeah,
like, processing things,
yep,
you know.
yep,
But
yep.
then also we'll see engineers will say, like, the training they got as an engineer, like, really
Mhm,
set them up. That's more
mhm,
specialized. That's
mhm,
nothing. That's
mhm.
more along that vocational.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
so
Yeah, yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
I wonder what thoughts you have. Do you like, obviously all of these are good,
yeah,
and what's most important is what the student wants, but
yeah, yeah,
do you have any thoughts on if somebody wants to be a fantastic critical thinker that can
yeah.
integrate different types of
Oh
knowledge?
yeah, oh yeah, sure. Okay.
What are your thoughts on
Okay.
what
Well, I
teachers
mean, if
need
I
to
were
think?
given sort of cheap,
Mhm.
blanket advice, I would say is you go in and you find three very different subjects, each with
Mhm.
a great teacher,
Mhm.
and dive in a little bit to all three of them. But very different is important because they'll look at things in utterly different ways, and that's valuable. But you can get a lot out of a single topic if you take it seriously.
Can
Because
I
if
give
you
you an example of that?
please,
I remember in college, and I went to Big State U, Michigan State
yeah,
University,
yeah,
but I learned about cognitive dissonance,
yeah,
and that was so eye-opening to
it
this day.
absolutely it
It
is.
explains so much behavior
Yeah,
because I understood how cognitive dissonance
it's a
impacts
it,
people's decision
it's
making.
a marvelous theory. It's
Yeah.
absolutely marvelous theory from the 1950s. Yeah, it's great. And you'll hear it mentioned on television fairly often, which is
Hmm.
interesting too to me because it's clearly a college level idea.
Yeah.
And you go, half the country doesn't know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
But it's a really, really powerful concept for sure. Yeah. I used to teach it, and I mean,
Well, why don't you explain it to our listeners that may not be familiar with it, you know?
cognitive dissonance is basically the idea that people tend to try to be relatively consistent in what they say and do.
Hmm.
So the I mean, we're inconsistent people, but you
Hmm.
don't like having it pointed out. And if
Hmm.
you start doing something that flies in the face of your announced preferences, you're just not going to do it, right? So one of the implications of this is that if you publicly commit yourself to a position early in a debate,
Hmm.
it becomes very difficult psychologically for you to change that position later. It's hard to admit you were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to admit you were wrong. And that has a lot of practical implications. For instance,
Hmm.
for like hiring committees. If you're on a
Hmm.
hiring committee, you don't want people to declare their final preference
Hmm.
early in the discussion because then it'll turn into a fight between different people on the committee. Where what you want is to keep everything kind of open and uncommitted, and then you can gradually work to the right answer. But no, cognitive dissonance is a great college idea. Is the way I think. A great
Yeah,
college.
the mind doesn't like that disunity. It will force itself
Correct.
to gravitate in one direction, and
That's correct.
when you're set on something, like, yeah, holding dissonant views, and doesn't really work the way the mind works. So you have to sort of diminish one to buy
Right.
into another, and
Right.
it happens all the time,
Yeah. Or you
it,
figure a way to sort of compartmentalize them, like, well, that
hmm.
doesn't really count. That's
Hmm.
not really what I'm up to now. Over here, I'm doing something else. Yeah,
Well,
it's
and it can
tricky.
explain a lot why, like, if people are really lots of things, like if they're completely committed to, say, to church or place of worship, and crazy
Mm-hmm,
things are
mm-hmm,
going on there,
mm-hmm,
why they may not leave,
mm-hmm.
because if they've bought
Right,
into this place,
right,
it's going to take a lot. Or a politician,
right,
if they've
right,
accepted,
for
they
sure.
really like the politician, and then the politician has egregious behavior, and then other people are like,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
come that person still follow that politician? Well,
Well,
you have
right.
to
And
kind of go through this process of admitting you're wrong, and it's a lot easier to
it's
dismiss
tough.
the
It's
evidence
tough.
that comes at you, and
Absolutely. That's
another
right.
way, it goes back to what my dad always taught me growing up: a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. you know he used to say that all the time, and I found that to be
Yeah,
true. A man convinced against his will is of the
yeah,
same opinion still. And I try to remember
yeah,
that, because
yeah.
sometimes when somebody comes at me with some harsh criticism that
Uh-huh.
I don't feel is true,
Yeah,
my younger self would have tried to debate the person back, or to try
right.
to present some other evidence that shows that I don't think they see the
Yeah,
full picture.
yeah.
But the older I get, the more I realize, like, they're not changing their view. They're dug in.
Right,
So
right,
I'm pretty
right.
much wasting my time. It's like I'm talking to a wall.
Well, let me point out that
Mhm,
one of the benefits of a liberal arts education is you
mhm.
get exposed to concepts like that, and
Yeah.
you think them through. And there's a lot of liberal arts stuff is really about human relationships
Mhm,
and emotions and psychology in the broad sense. I mean, that's what most English classes are
mhm,
about. You're reading
mhm,
about love and lust and
mhm.
loss and tragedy and conflict and jealousy and stuff like that. That's applied psychology, is what it
Yeah.
is, right? And the same is true for all the social sciences, and uh, whereas the more vocational fields, let's say, engineering or business or nursing or whatnot, they may not get into the human dimensions quite as much, right? Because they've got technical tasks they've got to accomplish at a high level. So it's just not part of the training in the same way.
Yeah, and obviously those are all, great, you know,
Yeah.
ventures and pursuits for people who are interested in them, and fields that are
Oh, yeah.
greatly needed. But
Yeah.
but this is of interest to me because the liberal arts is under assault.
Sure.
It's talked about, like, well, besides the stuff we talked about earlier about
Yeah.
indoctrination, it's sort of
Yeah.
talked about, like, it's a fast track to being unemployed or underemployed.
That's
That's
just
the
not
thing. Like
true.
nobody needs that. Like you're not
Yeah,
employable.
yeah,
A lot
it's
a
not
lot of
true.
times parents will tell kids, you bet, I'm not paying for you if you get a
Yeah.
degree in that,
Oh, I know.
and that's the perception out there, you know,
Yeah.
you know.
No, I agree. And the part of the problem too is that the payoffs of liberal arts education, I think, don't come in the first 5 years, let's
Hmm.
say, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of, like Florida as a state, one of their requirements is schools have to report on the income of their students 1 year after graduating.
Right.
Well,
Right. It's not
what does
fair.
that
Yeah.
tell you, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
tells you if you move straight into a good job, great,
Sure.
good for you. But a lot of our graduates, what I saw frequently was for the first 5 years, they would be floating around, maybe a personal assistant job here, maybe a retail sales, just different
Sure.
kinds of things, trying stuff out. And then at some point, they're in a room with people from a variety of different parts of, let's say, a company. There's a salespeople and the marketing people, and the HR and operations and so on. And they're all working on some problem, and everybody's coming at it from their own angle.
Hmm.
And our kid, at 28 years old or whatever,
Hmm.
would go, well, it looks to me like the real issue is this.
Hmm.
And they could see what the underlying problem was, getting past the individual disciplines
Hmm.
and formulate it clearly, because that's what you do in classes and on papers and stuff, and say, here's what I think is happening. And all of a sudden they jump into management, right? Which is a people job.
Hmm.
I mean, the managers, the leaders of top corporations, even, are not usually the best technical people.
Hmm.
They're the best at managing everybody else and figuring out how to put things together using different disciplines and fields. And so those management skills, being able to speak in public, being able to formulate an argument, being able to do sort of data analysis where some information comes in from some division, and you're trying to read these percentage tables or stuff. Like in our programs at Hamilton, again, all the social sciences, you get trained in data analysis and learn how to read those charts and things. And most people can't do it. And so, you're working, it's more people jobs, and communications, things like that. And so you hit your stride just a few years later. Now, a lot of people can't afford to wait a few years to make a good living. And I appreciate that. I respect that. Well, let me give you one other example, okay, of
Sure.
a vocational versus liberal arts approach. Say you want to go in the military.
Hmm.
Okay? Not difficult to do. I mean, you go down to the
Hmm.
local office and sign up, and they'll put you in boot camp. And 12 weeks later, and then maybe you get some extra training in working radars or anti-tank guns, or I don't know what. But they're different skills, and you're good to go, right? And you've got a solid occupation or profession and so on for life, right? You're good. Or if you can afford to take the time, you get into West Point because you'd rather be an officer, right? And you go to West Point and you discover West Point is officially, I mean, in all the rankings, is a liberal arts college. It's all the military academy, all the top academies are liberal arts schools because, yeah, you'll get military training for sure. They have those summer sessions that are pretty hardcore, but you'll also be taking a lot of English and a lot of math, and you study political science, and engineering, of course, is the biggest major there because the technology, military technology, is really important. But the second biggest major at West Point is international relations, is IR, right? Political science, history, cultural anthropology, stuff
Hmm.
like that. Because if you're going to be a field grade officer, not to say even generals, right? If you're going to be even a major, a colonel, a lieutenant colonel, so on, you've got to understand the difference between Shia and Sunni
Hmm.
if you're in the Middle East. And you better know something about the geography and history of Lebanon and Jordan and where those countries came from, stuff, if you're going to deal with the people there. And that's what upper level officers have to do. And those are liberal arts fields. Because initially people go, oh, why would you need to study religion in order to be in the military? Well, it depends what level you want to work at. But if you're a general, you damn well better learn some of that stuff. And the great generals we know, I mean, Patton was famous for, he read like nonstop history and subjects like that.
All right, friends, this concludes part 2 of 3. Hope you join us next week for the final part. Friends, on Thursday's episode, I'm going to keep in practice what I preached. You'll have the final part of Dan Chambliss. You'll have the final part of the segment you heard today on colleges being aggressive in their recruitment tactics. You'll have Christina Lopez for the first time. And we're recording a bunch of things, so I can't tell you which one I'm going to lead with first, but on Thursday I'll know. And I might even throw in another question from a listener. We'll see. But check in on Thursday for that. And friends, I can't emphasize it enough. I got 2 different products that I just ordered as giveaways, mostly for interviewees, because we have more interviewees than we have donors. But it's for interviewees and donors and students if they impress me with their questions. On one of them, it'll say right on the giveaway, it says, "Your college-bound kid, making college knowledge available to all." But on the other one, it says, "It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. But it's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success." I had to get that on the YCBK swag. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about YCBK on social media. And you help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating at yourcollegeboundkid.com and clicking the donate button. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. If you have a question or suggestion, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK and hit the orange button and speak, and we will do our best to get your question or your comment in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I'm the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admission and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, 2 admission officers from Colorado, Hillary Dickman from Colorado College, Kate Strickland from CU Boulder, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, Heath Einstein, the Chief Enrollment Officer at TCU in Fort Worth, Carter DeLauro, a co-director of college counseling in New York, and Christina Lopez, the former Dean of Admission at Barnard College, and our international college specialist, Kevin Newton from Dallas, Texas. Our stupendous sound engineer who makes everything happen is Nemanja Matvic from Serbia. Our reliable webmaster is John Rooney. Website updates are done by Joy Stucker. Image editing by Vlad Honchar. And what would we do without our volunteers? Guy Pillsbury, Sony Patel, and Andy Bernstein are all helping us with podcast marketing. Carolyn Wood, Mark Doniger, and Carrie Roberts book interviews with thought leaders. Amanda Dugan, Colleen Sinoki, Nicole Resch, Trevor Smith, Ryan Stepler, and Lynn Labash send thank yous to interviewees. If you want a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly newsletter, YCBK Plus, it's also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights and our upcoming events and receptions. And you can now do searches for past content by using our new Explore and Topics tabs. We really encourage you to explore our past content. We have close to 1,000 hours. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.